Most people think change has to be loud. A big decision, a dramatic moment, a clear before and after. But real change almost never works that way. Real change is quiet. It's subtle. It happens in moments no one else sees. And that's where the idea of becoming 1% better every day begins. 1% doesn't sound impressive. It doesn't feel powerful. It doesn't give you a rush. And that's exactly why it works. Because it doesn't scare you. It doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't ask you to become a different person overnight. It simply asks you to show up a little better than you did yesterday. Think about your life right now. Not the version you hope to have someday, but the real one. Your habits, your energy, your focus, your discipline. Most of the frustration you feel doesn't come from a lack of talent or intelligence. It comes from inconsistency, from knowing what to do, but not doing it long enough for it to matter. The 1% idea changes how you see progress. It removes pressure. It replaces intensity with patience. Instead of asking, how do I completely change my life? You start asking, what's one small thing I can do today that moves me forward? That question matters more than you realize, because the brain resists massive change, but it accepts small steps. 1% feels safe, manageable, almost too easy to ignore. But over time, those small improvements compound, quietly, relentlessly, until one day you look back and realize you're not the same person anymore. This isn't about motivation. Motivation fades. This is about systems, about identity, about becoming the kind of person who improves by default, not by force. Someone who doesn't wait for the perfect moment, but uses the moment they already in. And here's the truth most people miss. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. So if your habits improve by 1% each day, your life follows. Whether you feel ready or not, but understanding this idea is only the beginning. The real question is how it actually works, and why such a small change can create results that feel anything but small. And that's what we need to talk about next. The power of 1% better doesn't come from the number itself. It comes from consistency, from repetition, from letting time do the heavy lifting instead of willpower. Most people overestimate what they can change in a week and underestimate what they can change in a year. When you improve by 1%, you're not chasing perfection. You're building momentum. And momentum is what carries you forward on the days you don't feel strong, focused, or confident. Small actions, done daily, lower the friction between intention and behavior. Think of it this way. If you try to make a massive change, your mind starts negotiating. It looks for excuses. It reminds you of past failures. But a 1% action doesn't trigger resistance. It feels reasonable, almost obvious. And because it feels easy, you actually do it. Over time, these small actions stack, not in a dramatic way, but in a steady one. One better decision with food, one extra page read, one focused block of work without distractions, one honest conversation you didn't avoid. Each one seems minor on its own. Together, they change the direction of your life. This approach also changes how you measure success. You stop asking if today was perfect. You start asking if today was slightly better. That single question builds self, because every time you keep a small promise to yourself, your confidence grows. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that doesn't need validation. And here's the key. 1% better applies to behavior, not outcomes. You don't control results, you control actions. When you focus on improving the process, the results follow naturally. Stress decreases. Clarity improves. You stop swinging between extremes and start moving forward steadily. This is why the 1% principle feels realistic. It works with human nature instead of against it. It respects your limits while slowly expanding them. It turns growth into a daily practice, not a special event. But this idea only becomes powerful when it shows up in real life. On ordinary days, in routines, in moments where you usually run on autopilot. So let's talk about how 1% better actually looks when the day begins and life starts pulling at you from every direction. Most days don't feel meaningful while you're relieving them. You wake up, move through routines, handle responsibilities, and move on. This is where 1% better lives, not in big breakthroughs, but in ordinary choices. It might show up when you wake up and resist checking your phone for 10 minutes. That's 1%. It might be choosing to prepare a simple meal instead of ordering fast food again. 1%. It might be stopping work 5 minutes early to plan tomorrow instead of scrolling. Still 1%. These choices don't feel heroic, no one applauds them, but they quietly shape your identity. You start to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who makes intentional decisions, even when no one is watching. Habits are built this way, not by intensity, but by repetition. When the action is small, it's easier to repeat. When it's repeated, it becomes automatic. And once it's automatic, it no longer drains energy. It supports you instead. The same applies to mindset. 1% better might mean catching a negative thought and reframing it calmly. Not forcing positivity, just choosing a more useful perspective. Instead of saying, "I always fail," you say, "I'm still learning." That shift matters more than you think. In relationships, 1% better might be listening fully instead of half paying attention. In work, it might be finishing one important task before reacting to emails. In health, it might be taking a short walk instead of skipping movement entirely. None of these actions change your life in a day. But they change who you are becoming, and who you are becoming determines everything else. The danger is expecting these small actions to feel exciting. They usually don't. They feel quiet, sometimes boring. But boring is sustainable, and sustainable is powerful. When you commit to 1% better, you stop waiting for motivation and start relying on structure. You accept that progress doesn't always feel like progress in the moment, and that's when doubts start creeping in. When results aren't visible yet. When effort feels unnoticed. When old patterns feel tempting again. That's where most people give up. So before that happens, we need to talk honestly about the resistance you'll face and how to move through it without losing your direction. At some point you will feel stuck. You'll wonder if these small efforts are doing anything at all. This is normal. Growth often feels invisible before it becomes undeniable. The mistake most people make is assuming that doubt means failure. It doesn't. Doubt usually means you're in the middle, between who you were and who you're becoming. That space feels uncomfortable because there's no clear identity to hold on to yet. You'll miss days. You'll slip into old habits. You'll have moments where it feels like you're starting over. You're not. Progress isn't erased by a bad day. It's only erased when you quit entirely. The 1% mindset reframes failure. Instead of seeing setbacks as proof you can't change, you see them as data, information, feedback. You ask, "What made this hard?" instead of, "What's wrong with me?" Perfectionism is another trap. It convinces you that if you can't do it right, it's not worth doing at all. 1% better reject that idea completely. It values effort over appearance, consistency over intensity. There will also be days when even 1% feels like too much. On those days, the goal isn't improvement. It's maintenance. Showing up at all is a win. Staying in the game matters more than pushing forward. Self-doubt often gets louder when you're changing because the old version of you feels threatened. It wants familiarity, even if familiarity is uncomfortable. That voice isn't true. It's resistance. The calm response isn't to fight it aggressively. It's to acknowledge it and act anyway. One small action, one grounded decision. 1%. Over time, that voice weakens. Not because you silenced it, but because you proved it wrong with evidence. Quiet evidence. Built day by day, and eventually, something shifts. You stop asking if this works. You start living as someone who improves naturally. Which brings us to the final piece. What this looks like when it becomes part of who you are, not just something you try to do. Becoming 1% better every day isn't a challenge. It's a way of living. A steady rhythm, a mindset that says, progress is always available, even on ordinary days. When this principle settles in, You stop chasing transformation and start trusting the process. You measure your days by effort, not outcomes. You focus on direction, not speed. And that changes how you experience your life. You become more patient with yourself, more consistent with your habits, more grounded in your decisions, not because everything is perfect, but because you're moving forward with intention. Over months and years, the compound effect becomes visible. Discipline feels natural. Focus comes easier. Confidence feels real because it's built on evidence, not hype. This is how lasting change happens. Quietly, gradually. Without burnout, without drama, just a series of small decisions made with care. You don't need a new identity. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to wait for the right time. You just need today. And one small step that respects who you are and who you're becoming. Ask yourself a simple question. What would 1% better look like right now? Not tomorrow. Not next year. Right now. Then do that. And when tomorrow comes, do it again. That's how growth stops being something you chase and starts being something you live.